Good morning, everyone. This is Emily from Eurelectric. Thank you for joining our webinar on building power system resilience in times of cyber threats. We have an excellent lineup for you today. For those of you who are joining our webinar for the first time, Eurelectric is a trade association representing the European electricity industry in Brussels. This is the second of a two-part series on the topic of power system resilience. In the first part, we discussed the impact of extreme weather, and today we will focus on cyber threats. This morning's session will be moderated by Michael Jesberger, Chief Technology Officer at TSO Transnet BW in Germany, and co-chair of the European TSO DSO platform. To all of you out there following the discussion, we would like to give you an opportunity to submit your questions as well. So please type in any questions in the box as shown on the slide on your screen now, and we will try to put them forward to the participants. So with that, I will give the floor to Michael to moderate this morning's session.
Thank you very much, Emily, and also a warm welcome from my side to all participants. My name is Michael Jesberger. I'm the CTO and member of the board of Transnet BW at DSO in Germany, and currently also co-chair of the European TSO DSO platform. And as Emily mentioned, I will be moderating today's webinar on building power system resilience in times of cyber threats. I'll start by giving some background to the topic of power system resilience and electricity industry considerations from a transmission and distribution cooperation perspective. The electricity industry has a vital role to play in decarbonization of the European economy by continuing to deliver on even more ambitious targets for renewable integration and facilitation of e-mobility, e-heat, and flexibility. With this transition to a carbon neutral society, customers will be increasingly reliant on electricity supply with e-cars, and the digitalization of the power system during this transition brings also additional risk for attack of other players, and we need to be proactive in implementing countermeasures to avoid those threats. As transmission and distribution systems are one system, these measures need to be aligned. One puzzle for ensuring a common level of security of critical infrastructure in the European Union is drafting a network code on cybersecurity. And this is led by the Commission and co-chaired on TSO side by Keith Buzzard from NSOE and on the DSO side by Christiane Gabe from Eurelectric. If you would be so kind to give me my first slide. Thank you very much. What you can see there is how our energy system is going to move in the future. Today and also in the past, we were connected predominantly on the generation side, mostly on 400 kV and 220 kV level. And our load flows, they went from top to down. In the future, we are facing another challenge, even more photovoltaic with different consumption structures. On the lower levels, we will see wind parks connected on the lower voltage levels. And as a result, we see our load flows going up and down with all the challenges related a grid operator has. So this is going to change, and another thing which is also going to change are the various stakeholders. And therefore, I would like to ask you for the second slide, please. Thank you very much. So below the asset layer, which is very much known to us, we are facing digital layers and also other actors in the market. if you would please press the button again. So we have, yes, the asset owner, we have distribution and transmission system operator, but we have now or in the future even more prosumers, producers, consumers, aggregators, and a very interactive relation to the market. And those changes, as already described, they are provoking also other groups of people to take advantage, and that's something we have to take into consideration and which we have to protect ourselves. The purpose of today's session is to bring together a panel of relevant leaders in the power sector for the first 20 minutes to hear their views on impact of cyber threats to the power system, mitigation measures, regulatory or technical considerations to help support cyber resilience in the power system. And for the remaining 40 minutes, we will open up discussion with a Q&A session, and I hope you are contributing in a high frequency. Today on the panel, we have Mechthild Woersdorfer, Director of Sustainability. And I think we have a slide with the pictures as well. So we have Mechthild Woersdorfer, Director of Sustainability, Technology and Outlooks at the International Energy Agency, who might give us a global perspective on cyber threats. We have Stephan Lechner, Director of Euratom Safeguards at the European Commissions at DG Energy. He's coordinating the policy activities for the European Commission on cybersecurity in the energy sector. And then we have Knud Pedersen, Chief Regulatory Officer at Andel in Denmark and former head of Ørsted Distribution to give a DSO perspective on cyber threats. And we have Per Landsager, Director for Integration and Optimization in the business area generation of the company Vattenfall, who might give a generation perspective on the topic. Without further ado, I will now give the floor and the stage to Mechthild. So please, Mechthild.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Michael. I'm very pleased to join you for that important debate. I'm based in Paris with the International Energy Agency since 2 years, but have some previous experience also in the European Commission, including on that subject. So just to say a few words as a start. At the IA, we are looking at clean energy transitions and energy security. It started many, many years ago with a focus on oil, gas security, but more and more on electricity security. Electricity, as we all know, is part and gets a much more bigger part of modern society. We all see it even under the COVID crisis we are now happening everywhere in the world, that how important electricity and the link to the health system, to our work, to teleconferencing, how important electricity is, and increasingly so. We are coming up, and maybe we can show on, please, the short slide. We are coming up in a few weeks, end of October, on a major new report on electricity security, which will focus on 3 aspects. Basically on internal trends, what's happening to electricity security with more variable renewables and the impact on the grids. It will look at external threats. There will be 1 chapter on climate change and climate resilience, and I think that is something which you discussed also in the first webinar. And it will have 1 chapter on cyber attacks. So I might come back to some of those findings which we are just now putting together to the launch of the electricity security report. And my next point is also to see that cybersecurity is a very important topic, but we shouldn't see it only in isolation. There are a lot of things are happening in the energy sector, in the electricity systems, which are major transformations. And I think in your slide, it was also mentioned, there is rapid growth of renewables and distributed energy resources, as well as threats from climate change, as well as digitalization. And last, let me just underline digitalization as such has a lot of benefits, is positive. It has changed and will further change the energy and the electricity sector. But as you mentioned in your slide, Michael, it also increases the potential of cyber threats. And that's where we need to be aware of. And I think that's what we will discuss, obviously, today. And I think there are maybe 3 principles when it comes to cyber security, cyber resilience, I would call it. First of all, I think there is an importance to raise awareness across the sectors and the policymakers. I think the event today, bringing industry, TSOs, European Commission, international organization together, is a first step, and I very much welcome that. Our report, which we will launch in a month's time at a ministerial meeting, is also there to raise awareness of these very important issues to policymakers and broaden it a little bit out of the stricto sensu electricity sector and the experts. I think, secondly, there's an importance of security and resilience across the supply and value chain. We need to make sure that equipment manufacturers deliver secure hardware and software, and so that system integrators, grid operators, and grid users could track the security readiness of our assets and systems they deploy. So there is a whole chain which has to be aware of security and resilience measures. And third, and I think there a couple of players come in as well, there's the importance of collaboration and coordination across the sector. Obviously, the electricity sector has some very specific items which other sectors don't have. Still, I believe we can learn from experience from other sectors, but also I think we will hear a lot about the EU today and what the European Commission and other countries are doing. But there is also some lessons learned from approaches across the world, but I will come back to that. So for now, thank you very much, and looking very much forward to the discussions today.
Yeah, thank you, Mechthild. Very interesting to hear from your global perspective on cyber threats, especially your comment on we shouldn't see it only in isolation. I think that's remarkable, as well as we need to increase the awareness in our environment. 2 important topics. Moving on to our next panelist with us today, we have Stephan Lechner, Director of Euratom Safeguards at the European Commission, DG Energy, who coordinates their energy sector cyber security policy activities. Before this, he was Director of the Institute for the Protection and the Security of the Citizen at the European Commission's Joint Research Center in Ispa in Italy for more than 8 years, and prior to this, he held management positions and spent more than 18 years in the high-tech sector of private industries at large international enterprises and at telecommunication operators. He managed international expert teams in Germany and in China and has more than 25 years of experience in collaboration European projects. Dr. Lechner holds a degree in mathematics and computer science and a doctoral degree in cryptography. So a very experienced manager and leader. Stephan, the floor is yours. Thank you. So, Stephan, are you there?
No, can you hear me?
It's difficult. Yeah, I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me? I mean, I'm on the application.
Yeah, it's not very loud, so it's quite silent.
Can I talk louder and that will be better?
It's a little bit better, but at least for me, not on the necessary level. If Anne could give us some hint
Yes, I'm
on
having
how to proceed with that.
getting the volume across better. I can only talk as loud as I can here.
Yeah.
It's good on our side, Stephan. So please go ahead and then tell me when your slide should be shown. Thank you.
Yes, please
Okay.
be so kind as to
Good,
draw up the
thank
first
you.
slide. Can you please draw up the first slide? All right, thank you. I just wanted to give a quick motivation, and if you could click on, you will see that the smart grid is mostly composed by IT as the smart factor. So the smart grid of today is already there, and it is already smart, and it is already vulnerable to IT cyber attacks. The future development will have to bring much more intelligence into the net, into the grid, into the OT and IT connections, and into the connected world of devices. So there is a strong motivation in the combination of the two European Commission prime objectives, tackling climate change and digitalization, to protect the future smart grid in a stable, sufficient and resilient way. And therefore, if you click on, you will see that the future smart grid, click one more please, will look differently, more modern, and it will have IT all across the board. If you click one more, you'll see it. And one more to show that it will be really in every component. So this is going to be ubiquitous. It is going to be the future where all different vendors are having a foot in the door and new players are emerging. And knowing this future already now, and click on please, we are having a need to protect ourselves against this increased risk. And this is why we are working on a network code for cybersecurity. Click on the final one, please. On a network code for cybersecurity now. Actually, these activities have been started in 2016, looking into the particularities of the power grid in terms of cybersecurity. And having worked for more than 30 years now in information security, I know that the power grid itself is different. It has particular requirements, it has real-time effects, it has cascading effects, and it has a mix of legacy technology and brand new Internet of Things paradigms. And this makes it very special. Therefore, the European Commission has issued recommendations to the EU member states how to protect the power grid and how to work with these particularities, because a standard IT security approach will not necessarily fit the power grid needs, and it will definitely not fit the future smart grid needs. So our take is that we need to prepare early, and I feel that having started in 2016, we're rather a bit late already, because the smart grid is here and it is here to stay. So we will only meet climate change ambitions with a sufficiently smart grid that is also protected well enough. I'll leave it at this.
I think Michael is Michael, you are muted.
Okay. I think the organizer and me, we have pressed the mute button at the same time. Stephan, thank you very much. A true expert is somebody who can explain a complex situation with simple words. And the definition of smart grid, power grid plus IT, I think that brought it to the point. And then to say IT is connected everywhere and we are facing an increased risk, I think that's something everybody will understand and will agree on that one. So thank you very much for that transparent and good presentation. Moving on to our next panelist with us today, we have Knud Pedersen. Knud is chairman of the board of the two largest Danish DSOs called Radius and Cereus. That recently were merged into a new integrated Danish energy company called Andel. Knud has years experience in the electricity and gas distribution business from his previous role as head of Ørsted Distribution, and he is chairman of the DSO committee within Eurelectric. Knud, are you with us?
Yes. Yes. So should I just go on?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you very much for having this opportunity to say a few words on cybersecurity related to DSOs. I think already, as you pointed out, Michael, Stephan introduced the problems very clearly. Well, if you take my slide, if you can take the next slide, Annie. It's true that we are already in a state where you could say we have a smart grid integrated into our system. As DSOs, we have been used to think of our systems as locally based and very stable and rather passive systems where even though we could imagine cyber attacks, they would not hurt our customers to a large extent, and perhaps only rather few customers. But that picture is changing, partly, of course, due to digitization, which has already been mentioned, but also partly due to the new role of our network customers, because we are moving into a future where our customers will be much more actively interplaying with our grid systems. And why is that? Well, seen from the DSO perspective, we want to interact much more actively with our customers because we can see that we can optimize the value of our system and the value for the customers if we make that happen. But related to that interplay, of course, there is an aspect related to cyber threats that we need to be aware of. In future, we can foresee that a lot of connections behind the meter will have active effects on the system. Imagine, for instance, that you have a player who can start charging thousands of EVs at one time, then they can also stop the charging and thereby they can affect the system significantly. So we will see players who are connected and steered and managed directly in their connection point to the grid, but we will also see players who are not managed directly by the system and can be quite harmful to the system. I think that there are three areas which we need to work with. Of course, we, like all other companies, we need to raise internal awareness in our processes and in our companies. And secondly, I can only support what has been said by Stephan, that we need to develop standardized grid codes. And thirdly, we need to work more on what to do with what we would call behind the meter appliances, which can make an active contribution to stabilization of our system, but cybersecurity threat could also lead to the opposite situation. So this is certainly something which we need to develop further on. We need to introduce these more integrated systems because it will be economically beneficial for our societies. But of course, as Mitchell said, as a part of that, we also need to prepare ourselves to deal with cyber threats. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Knut. Very interesting aspects. Your view into the future that customers will interact more and more with the grid. Interesting point. And also the statement that more and more equipment behind the meter will show up. And what will this do with the grid, and how is it influencing the risk portfolio and the threat portfolio with regard to cybersecurity? So, yeah, exciting point. So thank you very much. Moving on to our next panelist. With us today, we have also Per Landsager, Director for Integration and Optimization in Business Area Generation from Vattenfall, who might give a generation perspective on the topic of cyber threats. He has 20 years experience working at Forsmark nuclear power plant in Sweden, mainly in the areas of safety, analysis, licensing, and plant design, and has 12 years experience at Vattenfall in the areas of licensing management for new build activities, fleet management, safety, and security. So we are happy that you're here, Per. It's your stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. As Vattenfall have many production units, I will give you my perspective of cyber threats. We have hydro and nuclear, heat and wind mostly. That would cover our production units. Some solar also, but this is the large ones. As we heard earlier, we see also an increased threat level, but the current status regarding cyber threats, we see a slight decline in incidents. We are happy about that, and we work very lot with this issue. I want to give you a picture about how to protect a unit. This one is a nuclear power unit, and we use very traditional methods. We have the zone principles, where outermost zones, zone 3 and 4, are connected to the internet, and the two innermost zones where the process is and where the process supervision is are not connected at all to the outer world with any physical connection. So in terms of production process or threats, for the moment we don't see that as the main issue. Typically we also have robust components. We speak about relays and technology that's I shouldn't say old-fashioned, but it's very robust for the situation. Not computer control systems in our nuclear power plant, as a general observation. What we look at specifically is about information leakage, and that is facilitated small items like printers, video conference equipments, and USBs, etc. but the vast majority are phishing attacks to people who work inside of these zones. Also, an issue is that the risk of cloud services should be acknowledged because the pressure is high to increase work efficiency, and cloud services is very good to have, but you should acknowledge that you might lose control over your data. About the measures we have the zone principle. It's robust, we think, and we also perform regularly penetrations tests to see if there are any breaches in them. We also increase the security vetting with personal interviews and things like that. That is introduced more broadly on everyone that works within these production units, and also increase in education. Several of the other panelists talked about regulations, and we see a lack of guidance and regulation on this field, because the harmonizations between the stations could be better. All the stations do different things, and a harmonization not only within Vattenfall, also within Europe should be of good. So that was my speech.
Yeah. Yeah, Per, thank you very much for your speech. Also very interesting from my side. I think that the nuclear power plant operators, they must be very much advanced in protecting their system. And they have started much earlier than the remaining part of the business in how to protect and how to safeguard those plants. So it would be interesting to see what we can learn from the nuclear segment, and also interesting to hear that you are using well-proven technology such as relays, which are predominantly analog technology, which is exactly the opposite of digital technology. I wouldn't expect that we are now going to change from digital into analog to protect to have a 100% cyber secure environment. Very good example for alternatives. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, now it is time for the panel discussion. If you could get our 4 speakers back on screen. As I remind you of their names, we have heard from Mechthild Wörsdorfer, Director of Sustainability, Technology and Outlooks at the International Energy Agency, who gave us a global perspective on the topic of cyber threats. Stephan Lechner, Director of Euratom Safeguards at the European Commission's DG Energy, who gave an outlook of cybersecurity policy activities for the European Commission. We have Knut Pedersen, heard our Chief Regulatory Officer in Denmark and former head of Ørsted Distribution, who gave us a DSO perspective on cyber threats. And last but not least, Per Landsager, Director for Integration and Optimization in the business area generation from Vattenfall, who gave us a generation, in this case, a nuclear generation perspective. Before we move to the debate, I want to check with the 4 panelists what are your first reactions to the brief presentations we just heard, and what is the one thing that really got your attention. So if you could give me your opinion please on that one.
I can start with one. Observations is that we have new technology. I get a very annoying feedback right now. Oh, now it's working. New technology is coming in, and we also have high pressure on work efficiency, meaning using new technology and new services. I think we should be aware of the threats, cyber threats in that perspective, and very often these decisions are taken on a very high level, and maybe not all of the things are accounted for.
One comment from my side, perhaps, Michael, if okay. So one comment is that I think perhaps in the way we work together, I think it's clear that that the TSO level and the DSO level should need to work closer together, because when we are talking about decentralized sources which can be used at a system level, then it affects also the local level, and that's why the standards in which we require for activation of that kind of sources need to be developed in a way where it's integrated. Basically, there's an integrated perspective. So I think that's a perspective which we have to bear in mind in our future cooperation.
Just from my side, maybe just to add, having listened to all the speakers, I see a lot of convergence in a way, how we see the problem of cyber resilience, cyber attacks, even though there are very little and it might go down, but that is one of the future key threats. The question would be how to raise more awareness. I think, as Per said, the higher level, the political level, is not enough aware. And there's a second question on the cooperation between DSO, TSOs. How can we make sure that there are the standards? And I think that's more the question for the EU, first of all. And I'm sure Stephan has some comments on the TSO, DSO cooperation and Eurelectric as well. But I think there's a lot of common, we are, at least among us, we are aware of what are the key issues. And from the IEA side, I will speak later a little bit maybe of some other experience outside EU, but that's also the questions and hopefully some of the answers we give in our report, which comes out in a few weeks. Thanks.
Yes, I'll continue seamlessly. The first reaction, of course, connecting to Mechtel's statement would be, we have a lot of awareness already and we are converging in our opinions, but currently we're still in the status where we are admiring the problem. So nobody knows how to really slice the elephant. Nobody knows how to just harden the supply chain, because we do not have a certification methodology everywhere, and we will have to deal with technologies in the next couple of years that have not even been developed today. So there is an understanding of the problem, there is an awareness about the problem, but there is no access to the problem yet. And therefore, we would have to work on first steps into solutions. This is why the network code on cybersecurity is so important. And this is why the collaboration of the TSO and DSO level at the EU federal level in this circle is so important. This is why we're having TSOs and DSOs around the table already now by the representatives of their associations. And this is why we really want to go tangible first steps. And we would be more than happy to be able to guide into tangible first steps also in other areas than only the network code. There will be a lot more to be done.
Ist aufgehoben. Yeah. Thank you very much for your contribution, for your statement. The reason why I'm smiling is that the mute button is operated from both sides, and that's creating a little bit of disturbance. But no big issue. So thank you very much for your reactions to the presentation, and finally also to the reinforcement of the message about the importance of the network code. I think that's well received. We will now move on to the discussion. Meanwhile, I've received a question which is addressed to Knut, and in parallel also to Stephan. How does the panel see the sharing of cybersecurity data amongst the energy operators in the industry? So how does the panel see the sharing of cybersecurity data amongst the energy operators in the industry? Who would like to give an answer to that one?
Should I start?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
I think my intention is to be very positive towards sharing experiences and sharing knowledge. Of course, when it comes to data, we need to be very sure what kind of data we are sharing. I think there's a good perspective which we can draw on from the GDPR regulation, that we have to integrate this perspective by design in our thinking. Whenever we develop something new here, we have to design the new in a way where we also have a good preparatory planning for how to handle the cybersecurity part. And I think when we share across the TSO DSO level, for instance, we need to have the same structure in the way we do things, and we should start doing that and start developing that.
Can I come in on this? I must admit I am sick and tired about the continuous concerns about sharing cybersecurity data, because in the discussion nobody really intends to press people to share data about detailed vulnerabilities with competitors. This has never been the intention of sharing data on cybersecurity. Sharing of cybersecurity data is meant at a higher level to exchange experience and to tell about approaches to tackle certain issues, or even in a real case to just inform each other to find out if an attack is tailored towards a particular operator or to the whole community, which is, if you are affected, not easily found out. So these things are important. And the continued challenging of, we need to be very careful when sharing data. I mean, this is understood. Nobody wants anyone to share business secrets, detailed vulnerabilities, or even commercial data under the headline of cybersecurity sharing. We want to become stronger together. This is the intention. And we should have the sharing of data discussion under this headline.
So, yeah, thank you very much to Knut and Stephan. Any response from Per or Mechthild to those two statements?
I totally agree with both. We see a lack of harmonization, and the industry need guidance in this. We need communication between each other, because this is a major cost driver if we do different things on all parties. One should I just want to address another thing. There are also rules for export control into nuclear. We need to consider these factors also. So that's my point.
Ist aufgehoben.
Yeah, thank you very much, Per. There is meanwhile another question for Mechthild there. It's a little bit in relation to the network codes which are under development and cybersecurity standards. Have you heard of different experiences from around the world when it comes to implementation of cybersecurity standards and best practices? What are the best lessons learned you have encountered?
Thank you, Michael. I think there are now different evolving policy approaches, and we have the EU with the NIS directive, and now which was adopted already in 2016, which is obviously broad, and now the application of the network code for the electricity sector. In the US, for example, there is another approach. It's much more prescriptive. It's much more mandatory. It's the US NERC ZIP, as it's called, and they have chosen specific mandatory requirements for the industry and for everyone else, which covers cyber resilience, but the data issue obviously is also a bit sensitive here, sharing data. But the approach as such has much more obligatory, mandatory standards across the US, and then there are federal level applications. We see also in other parts of the world, Australia, Brazil, Japan, different approaches. I would say, I mean, the two kind of distinct approaches so far, the EU, which is more the framework, the NIS directive and so on, and going into more details or more as requested, as far as I can hear from the panelists as well, and the US, which is very prescriptive, mandatory obligations. We have, for example, in Canada, also at federal level with the Ontario Energy Board, which has mandatory requirements for the distribution and transmission system operators, DSO, TSOs, to report annually on the status of cybersecurity readiness, referencing to their Ontario cybersecurity framework. So there's a reporting obligation. I think we need the right balance between not too much bureaucratic. It shouldn't be an administrative bureaucratic exercise, and the more framework approach. It needs a cultural change. I mean, it needs really an convincing insight from all the partners involved to take that serious and not make a report like we do also for other things. So this balance between being more prescriptive, taking it absolutely serious with all players, and change in culture to be aware of. And as I said, we are analyzing that, and more countries are very much aware of the issue. And I think looking at the EU, and maybe we can exchange back, have a roundtable, maybe we might organize that. We had Stephan Lechner, I think, last year to explain a little bit what EU is doing with Japan and Australia, and we will continue that. I think we should learn from the best practice and try to apply that across. Thank you.
Ist aufgehoben.
Thank you very much, Mechthild, especially the cultural aspect and creating the awareness of the importance of cybersecurity. I think that's essential. I understood that you say that also data exchange in the US is also an issue and under discussion. What is your explanation for that one? I mean, on the one side, we want to protect us against cyber attacks. On the other side, the exchange of data seems to achieve this target. The exchange of data is still under discussion and very restrictive. Is that a contradiction to exchange data and to protect against cyber attacks, or is it a necessary process to become successful to protect ourselves?
Thank you. What Knut mentioned, it depends on how the data is used. There is a willingness probably, and who owns it. It's not as much as data as such. There's no willingness to share, but there is a need to know who gets it, for what purpose, and that it remains in a safe and secure place. Like we have debates in other instances as well.
Ist aufgehoben.
Okay, thank you very much. Knut, you were nodding, so you agree with that statement?
Yes, basically, yes, I agree. I think it should be possible. I think that was also what was said by Stephan. It should be possible to structure this data exchange in a way where we learn and improve ourselves, while not letting ourselves open to more risks, basically. So of course, data exchange could also be risky. And then there is a commercial element, and there is the privacy element, which we need to be aware of. But I think with the right structure, we should be able to develop a framework where we can make this happen.
Yeah, I think this is
Ist aufgehoben.
Thank you very much for this response. Meanwhile, I've received another question. There are major aggregations of manufacturers already in gigawatts, which control the household assets via the home gateway connected to the public internet. Example, PV storage battery, EV wall boxes, PV inverters. Will this be considered in the network code for cybersecurity? There was nobody namely mentioned who is for this question, but I remember that Knut has talked about the equipment behind the meter, and this goes a little bit in that direction, and maybe Knut, you can help us in answering that question.
Yes, as I understand it, I think it will not be fully dealt with the grid codes part, but Stephan can correct me here. I think the problem here is that you can have a lot of installations behind the meter who is not directly connected to the grid, but can be activated and have an effect on the grid. And we like this. We like to interact with. We need to develop a business model where we can have a much more flexible interplay with that kind of customer. We want to interplay with these customers. So we need to develop this in a way where we also allow business models where aggregators can activate that kind of installations. But we need to also know that if the aggregator doesn't have any kind of cybersecurity resilience, then that kind of activation could be very problematic as well. So far, although it has developed to some extent, so far it's not a big issue, but we want this to develop, and then it will become a big issue. And we need to find solutions to that which might not be fully covered by the grid codes.
Can I come in on this? Thanks. I fully agree with this statement. So the network code will not cover, most probably not cover these particular installations behind the meter. And it's not meant to cover them. The content of the network code will only be seen probably early next year when the formal ideas of work on the network code are starting. The informal consultations might already be in October, so very soon. The problem with the aggregator is that the installations that are aggregating are not traditional electricity aggregators anymore, but it could be an indirect aggregation by just a smartphone app that becomes very popular and steers all these home appliances. And then it would be completely out of the electricity sector. It would be something that is pure IT, can be downloaded, can be changed, can have weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and we would not really be able to control it very well. So the April 2019 recommendations of the European Commission towards the member states for cybersecurity in the energy sector are already looking at the things, because this is a mix of legacy applications and the new Internet of Things. And we're asking the member states to also take measures that the DSOs are hardened and are aware about this risk that is completely outside the energy domain, but it will be affecting the energy domain strongly in the future.
Okay, here, now I got unmuted. Well, just one point which I think could add to some part of the solution to this. We want to buy these flexibility services as DSOs, but the TSO might also need that kind of flexibility service. So when we buy the service from an aggregator, then we can require the aggregator to install the necessary, you could say, defense systems, but that might make it more expensive. So we are in this early stage. We want to develop the business model and support the business development. We want to play with new players, but we need to have you could say a design principle for dealing with that. And of course, we also need to look into the costs and how would it affect the electrification cost and the flexibility purchase cost and so forth. So this is an issue we need to start working on, and we should do it in the cooperation between the TSO and DSO, as I said.
The formal implementation with regard to national differences. So we will see a national network code on European level. Do you see a need to adapt this code on national level according legal or technical national requirements, those standards and codes? Or will we see this network code as one package for all grid operators, manufacturers which are affected?
The network code is seen to be a common baseline and a common understanding, so this should be at the European level. Of course, anyone can do more, but at least the common baseline should be the same for everyone.
I think here really there is an added value by having common standards at a European level. So we should start by developing that, and hopefully that would lead to something which could be as comprehensive and fulfilling our needs, basically.
Leitung ist aufgehoben.
Thank you very much. looking at the time, there is one last question for Per. What are the differences in impacts of cyber threats across the generation technology types, such as thermal, nuclear, hydro, wind, and solar, and how has this threat landscape changed in your experience? So that's the last question to the generation people, where everything starts. We talk about it at the end.
Yes, as you see, the large units are base load. They are also very important to have them on the grid, so they are very, very well protected. Coming to wind and solar, the dependency on their availability is much lower because of the weather changes and types like that. So the need to protect them is, I say, it's important, but less important because they don't contribute to the net stability so much. So I would say that there's a huge difference between hydro, nuclear, and heat with solar and wind.
Thank you very much, Per. And yeah, we are reaching the end of this webinar. Let me conclude on some points. We have heard from a variety of electricity industry leaders regarding best practices in protection power systems from cyber attacks and dealing with consequences of cyber attacks. We have heard views from a global perspective from the European Commission regarding legislation, upcoming initiatives, network codes, the DSO perspective from Denmark, from a seasoned DSO experienced manager, as well as from the power generation perspective from Vattenfall. I would like to thank all panelists for their contribution. I would like to thank all panelists for the good preparation. I want to thank also Eurelectric as a host for the very good preparation. Thanks to Ken, thanks to Emily, thanks to Christian, thanks to everybody. It was really interesting for me, and it was also fun. Those 60 minutes were running very fast. Thank you to all participants for their interest, and hope to see you soon somewhere else, maybe in another Eurelectric webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.